Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 75th episode of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today we have a very special treat. You will notice that I am not doing this at my regular time slot of Sunday at 2 p.m. EST. And that is because I am talking to people in two different time zones. So this is a 3 time zone conversation. And I am hosting today Ms. Karen Newman and Ms. Kimberly Chatto. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to both of you ladies and hear your story. But before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and just read the show notes for those of you who are listening only and not watching online or haven't had a chance to see the show notes. So, we're going to be discussing what happens when two people meet while serving together overseas and a beautiful friendship develops. We're going to touch upon friendships among women, government contracting, serving overseas, and preparing for a successful transition from the military. Karen Newman is a multifaceted seasoned communications practitioner with more than 25 years of communication expertise. She is a communication educator, executive, professor, and author. Captain Chim Chatto is the Director of Public Affairs for U.S. Special Operations Korea. Kim, she brings her energy and enthusiasm into all her workplaces and excels in getting to know people to build cohesive teams and creative solutions. She started her military career as a combat crew commander, which produced a foundation for attention to detail and discipline. This experience helped her transition into the world of public affairs, and there she tackles unique problems through communication strategies. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So, Karen, I think I'm going to start with you. And what I'd like to know is what got you started down, where are you from, first off, and what got you started down the road as a professional communicator?
Great questions. Well, to know me, and everyone that's worked with me knows I am from New Orleans. So lots of food is involved if you get to work with me. And I have known since sixth grade that I was going to be a communicator. And that is all I've done. Unlike many people in the military, like Kim's bio did amazing other things, I have been focused on communications for 30 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's amazing. I always think that people kind of fall into communications. A lot of us do, especially in the military. And it's fascinating to think that you knew at such a young age that this is what you wanted to do. What about you, Kimberly?
So I'm originally from Olongapo City, Philippines, but ended up growing up in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I'm a cheesehead. But yeah, I started off my Air Force career. I actually come from a big Navy family. So I went rogue and decided to go Air Force, but started in the nuclear career field. Did that for a while, but my degree was in journalism and strategic communication. So it was the goal the whole time to hopefully transition to public affairs. And I was able to do that. And then ultimately ended up meeting Karen. So here's where we're at today because of it.
That's amazing. And that's what we're really going to talk about today is sort of how you guys came together. So I guess I'll start with you, Karen. Tell me a little bit about how you guys met and what some of those first early interactions were like.
Well, I used to be an instructor at the Defense Information School in Fort Meade, and many of the military communicators listening probably are familiar with DINFOS if they haven't graduated from DINFOS. I was lucky enough to have Kim in one of my courses. And from there, however, she was an amazing student and went on and did great things, and we connected and followed each other on social media. And I saw that she was in South Korea, and then just by chance, I had an opportunity as a contractor to take a job in South Korea at USFK and took it, posted it. Kim saw that and immediately connected. I'm here. Connect with me when you come, please. And that is so you'll hear during the course of this podcast how that just really became a lifeline for me.
Yeah, Kimberly, can you tell me a little bit more about how you felt when you saw that Karen was in the process of possibly getting the job over there?
Oh, absolutely. I was excited. Korea is a unique opportunity to really build your community. And this was my first overseas assignment. And so I had gone through everything kind of like on my own, and having somebody who's a friend and a colleague come through, I'm like, oh, I've got you. I've already been through all the things. Let me help you. But it's also just nice too, because then I knew we were going to be able to connect. Whereas, like, she lived on the East Coast and I was in New Mexico at my last assignment. We were finally going to be stationed together. So we were going to be able to go to all these Korean cafes and go and just spend time together. And then also just like have opportunities to talk professionally and grow in like communication. So I was really excited, and I could not wait for her to be here.
That's so cool. And Karen, were you apprehensive? I mean, us military, I feel like it's like we just know. We just expect to be deployed. We expect to move overseas. But as a government contractor, were you apprehensive about that?
It was a choice to make. And having seen posts from Kim and other former students about how they're enjoying where they are and really embracing the culture around wherever they're stationed, made me think, well, if not now, then when will I do this? Because as not a military person, I didn't get assignments all around the world to do this. So I thought this was my chance in my career as an empty nester and whatnot, that I can tackle this.
Yeah. And Karen, I'll ask you then this too. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced moving to Korea?
Well, I moved there again as a contractor, and one of the things I immediately realized is it is not the same experience as all of my former students online were having. I was dropped there without any information in terms of how to get money. I was told, we'll pick you up at the airport and we'll get you a Wi-Fi SIM card so you can communicate, and we'll bring you to Camp Humphreys. Well, the reality was I landed in a foreign country. I had to find the bus to Camp Humphreys. I had to figure out days later how to get communications because I didn't have a car or transportation to get to something, didn't know how to get money, didn't know, have anything provided to me on how to survive. And that's where I reached out to Kim, and I guess she could sense my, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And she immediately came over to the B&B that I was dropped off into. I didn't even know where I was. I couldn't even tell her where I physically was. And she brought coffee, and she's like, okay, we're going to talk through everything. This is what you need to know. This is this. I've got you. And that was my lifeline.
Kim, can you reflect on that moment
Sure.
and that period?
Yeah, I mean, so Karen came slightly after like the big COVID waves. And when I first got here, we were still being assigned to like the COVID barracks and everything. So you're like shuttled in like the middle of the night through a foreign country, and you're not familiar with anything. And so I just remember how it's slightly overwhelming and it's a lot, and you're exhausted because it's a 14-hour flight. And so when she was saying like, hey, I don't know what's going on. Like this company I'm working for isn't communicating with me. I was like, oh, I've got you, because I've been there. You immediately feel this weight as you're like kind of settling in, and you're like, I'm in a foreign country. What am I doing? And so to be able to, if I could have helped her in any way, I'm just like, yes, we'll talk through any questions that you have. I'm here for you. I mean, there was even one point, like my sponsor was a guy here I didn't know. He just, this poor guy had just been assigned to me out of nowhere. And I remember at that time, from my experience, they didn't tell you that, like, hey, you're not provided with towels in the barracks. You don't have, like, you get food, but you don't have water. Like, there's things. So I'm asking him for help, and he's like, I can grab you a towel. And I'm like, no, I need you to go buy me a towel. Like, there's like things like where I'm like, yeah, like just like walking through that, but it can be a lot, and you can feel really isolated. And that was like the last thing that I wanted for my friend. I'm like, okay, if your introduction to this country is like this, no, let's fix this. Let's make this a better experience. So yeah, if I could help it anyway, I was more than happy to.
Yeah, I think I was a little naive, I would say, about that, having traveled around throughout my life, especially in Europe, and speak French. I underestimated being dropped into a Asian country where I don't speak any Asian language, and being dropped there with no real network outside of Kim, to live and to survive and not have the support I thought I was going to have from my contracting company. Didn't have medical insurance provided to me, although it was supposed to be, like no proof of insurance.
Mm.
Got there, my Airbnb was for 5 days and then no other arrangements. And I asked, well, can you give me a list of real estate agents? And it was like, oh, we can't find that. So thinking you're going to be homeless on the other side of the world. So it was traumatizing. Just the possibility of being homeless is traumatizing, but then being new and dropped into this foreign country with no network was also it was just so stressful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can only imagine, and I think it makes me kind of take for granted the process that's sort of tried and true for those of us who serve on active duty. Because it's already so overwhelming, even when I moved to the UK, because we don't have like the base support services that are close by. And this was my first overseas assignment myself. And so there's a lot that I had to learn about this process. So Karen, did you come over here by yourself?
Yeah, I was an individual hire, just like you'd be a new employee in a company,
Mhm.
and I was being augmented to the contract. So by myself, there's a team in place that have been there, but I was dependent, on them. But their role, they work there. Their role is to show me the ropes at work, not to set my life up. There is no support system for that, and well, it depends on the contracting company. Obviously, some are better than
Better than
others.
others. Yeah. Yeah. So I think too, I had my husband at least with me who did a lot of the research, to be honest, to get over here and figure out how to get our dog over here. We were able to do a lot of those things together. But when you move um, unaccompanied and alone, it's a completely different experience to do all that navigation by yourself. So the fact that you had Kimberly there, I'm sure was just such a blessing.
Yes, definitely. I did underestimate that too. For all I know you have a lot of amazing female listeners. Is that I was a single mom for 10 years and I was like, I can survive anything. I'm an
Mhm.
independent woman. I can do this. And
Right.
I have a partner now for the past 10 years, but I underestimated that you can't do everything by yourself. Sometimes you really do need help of other people.
For sure, for sure. And I can relate a lot to what you said about the language barriers. I think people take that for granted. I think that there's this idea of, oh my gosh, it's so exotic and wonderful to live overseas. But I know when I got stationed, or I did a TAD assignment, temporary assignment duty in El Salvador, I really underestimated what it's like to be in a country where people just don't naturally speak English or have English as a second language that they revert back to. In El Salvador, there's many people who don't speak English, and I definitely look at moving overseas differently now based on that experience.
And thanks to Kim, she told, what was the app that you scan it,
Papago?
Papado, you could
Yeah.
scan things and it would read it and translate it for you. Well, first of all, anyone that uses any kind of AI or voice recognition knows sometimes that translation is a little dicey. But even the translation, for example, there was a sign on the side of the road. I went to translate it and it says savage animals around here. I'm like, what savage animals are going to come out? This is when we were at this is when we were
Situation
at
I'm in right now.
exercise. We were in a different
Oh,
location for exercises, and then but I had people on my team that spoke Korean, and I was able to ask. They're like, "Oh, that means like deer crossing the road." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's a different idea." Okay, when I came back, one of the things I appreciated so much was like being able to do my laundry and understand what the settings are in my
oh
washer and
yeah.
dryer. Like if you translate it, the translations make no sense.
Oh man, that just makes me laugh because the washers and dryers here in the UK are very confusing as well, and they're tiny, as I believe they are in Korea. So it's like
Yes.
you do these like half loads, and you spend your whole day doing laundry because, oh man. So Kimberly, how long did you guys work together?
So for in Korea, so she worked at USFK and then I worked at S.O.S, so we are still at Camp Humphreys together.
Mhm.
Karen, how long was it? It was like, was it 5 months?
Yeah.
Okay, it was about 5 months, but that was wonderful though, because with public affairs, I think sometimes you can, especially here, you have an opportunity. We're professional communicators, but until you start talking to people, you're like, wow, I'm kind of on this island by myself of like unique problem sets that I'm facing on my own. And having someone at USFK doing like Comstrat type of stuff and getting to know other people in other public affairs fields for other component commands, you then are able to like commiserate a little bit, but then also be like, hey, how can I help you? Like, how can we help each other? Because I would say in this assignment too, a lot of people are minimally manned or in one deep spots. So you're just like, you're in the sauce and you're just like, how am I going to figure out this problem set? And then you're realizing other people have either figured it out on their own and can help you, or they're doing it at the same time. So we're much better at it now. And it was actually, I think, Karen being at USFK that helped inspire a lot of it, because I'm just like, man, you feel lonely sometimes. And I'm just like, what's going on? But yeah, no, she was great. She's a blessing.
Well, Kim was fortunate enough to, after she helped me figure out how to eat and get money and transportation and a place to live, Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. Um, she plugged me into, she's very involved in the Christian community there, and she plugged me into a women's prayer group. And that really became, believe it or not, like that was my thing. I looked forward to every week was going to that prayer group, because I could be with a group of women. And one of them was also a young PA person. She was just switching into PA. So it was great for me as a older communicator to not feel so needy, that I could maybe mentor or help these earlier career communicators a little bit.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's so beautiful. I mean, I think that that's what really drives us, is that when we can feel needed and of service, and we're not, especially if we're reaching out and needing help from other people, then the ability to then give back that help and to provide that service to the same person that you needed help from at one point, I think is really important.
Yeah, that was important to, and then when I made the decision that I just cannot continue to stay in Korea with this contracting company for what we talked about and other reasons, I to Kim in this prayer group, I was just like, here, we have a treadmill in my apartment, we have this, we have that, come, it's all yours.
Now
Kim,
my treadmill.
now Kim's treadmill. Um, and then Kim had, a car problem, which wasn't good for her. But I was like, oh, good. I just spent money on this, bought this Hyundai. I just here, take this Hyundai. So
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
they're all blessings that it all comes out in the wash. We're just like, okay, these are problems that we can all solve together. But that group was really, and still is, like super, super connected, and just like a beautiful opportunity to be with people. Because I think like unique problem sets with being overseas is that you're all away from family, and sometimes you're here unaccompanied. Some people are brand new spouses. Some people are, have only been overseas. Like you have all these different experiences, and you come together because we're all stationed in South Korea. And it's amazing. I think it's probably the strongest like faith-based prayer group women's community I've ever been in. And it's unique and amazing. I love it. And I was so glad that Karen got to be a part of it too.
That's awesome. You guys are making me excited about our Chief Public Affairs Conference for SHAPE, which is, of course, our higher headquarters in the NATO world. And we get to invite all the what we call the ACO commands to come. And we're actually even doing a tour at the Ministry of Defense, so for the UK. So I'm really excited about that, to
great.
meet some of the UK PAOs and do a little bit more networking. You guys are motivating me that I probably need to get out of my bubble and do some sort of women's networking and meetups and things like that. I do have an animal get together at Parliament on Tuesday, so I'm very excited about that, to meet all the animal policy people in the UK, because I haven't networked with them yet. So it's so important to do things like that, and to connect in your local community. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Oh, definitely. Kim, she was misconnected. She knew
Yeah.
everyone.
So how did you tell me how you did that? How did you start to make those connections locally?
So community is it's like a huge part of my personality. I think the military, from my experiences, it's one of those things where as soon as I get to a duty station, it becomes my top priority. So I'm a single mom. I'm here in a company and my kids are back in the States, but wherever I go, it's kind of like I need an emergency contact. So I got to make some friends. So I think I'm naturally very extroverted. So I just try to connect with people. Usually I do that through like a church community first, but through base like parenting groups or spouses pages or things, I just get to know people. And I think being extroverted and from Wisconsin, we have like Midwest nice personalities. So we just, I am that like when I'm the person who will bring over like a dish or like an apple pie. And I remember my very first military experience when I was previously married. I was at Camp Pendleton, and I do not. I fully expected someone to come over with an apple pie because I'm like, that's what all like the movies and the shows say, right? And then when that didn't happen, I was like, oh, I need to be that person. Like if I want to create community this way and showcase that, like I need to be that force. So I think for me, the biggest thing is seeing friends and people who could really benefit from that, and then plugging them in with people. And I've just met the most amazing people here because of it, and we are so supportive. And I've had COVID, or I've had like I just had a surgery, and these people show up for you in ways that like they're your family when you're here overseas, and they're amazing.
No, that's so important. How has it been for you, Karen, adjusting to going back to the States after being overseas?
I was a little, it took me a while. It took me a couple of months to kind of get just from the whole, not, I would say trauma might be too strong of a word, but from the whole experience, which wasn't totally positive, it just took me a little bit of time to do a reset. And it was over the holidays. I came home, so it was a good time to do a reset. And but it definitely changed me. Like people that are close to me say you're different now. And maybe it's just like grateful for all the little things. Being able to get into my car and read road signs,
Right.
things like that. Not having to drive a 2016 Hyundai too.
Yeah.
That was
Great.
one of my goals. Like I'm a convertible driver. I'm like, I'm going home and getting a convertible again. So yeah, those things. But I want to say that I'm looking forward to Kim is going to now be transitioning out of the military and entering a strange new world for her, which is my world of being, just an independent professional and navigating that. And I hope I can be here to help her every step of that way during that next transition for her life.
Kimberly, what inspired you to get out and go on this new chapter?
That's such a good question. Several different experiences. I think my biggest motivating factor is that it is really hard to be a single mom in the military. Most of my military career, I've been in for over 10 years. Most of it, I was married. And doing my first assignment as a single parent, being single in general, overseas was very humbling. And I think just like the perspectives that I gained from becoming a mom and being active duty, I gained so much experience in terms of like, man, being single as a service member in the military is really, really hard. There's a lot of assumptions made in terms of what your capabilities are and what your bandwidth and what your workload should look like, where it's hard. It's just really tough. And I think it gave me so much perspective in terms of like making sure that we have solid support systems for all of our service members, not just those who are like a traditional family dynamic. And so, but with
single sailors, young
Yeah.
single sailors, that's
Yeah.
it. We've got
Yeah.
young single sailors with support networks, and then we have family.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of tough because I'm a senior 03, and so they expect me to know all of my things, and I'm like, for the most part, yes, I do. But there's things that'll come up, and I'm like, actually, no, I don't have a partner to do like my TMO stuff or to sit with my household goods, so it has to be me. But if I'm in a one deep spot, like that puts me between a rock and a hard place because like I have to go, I have to do that. I don't have anyone else who can. And so there's things where, yeah, it's been really humbling that way. And so with that, I want to be more present for my kids, or to at least have the flexibility to choose what that presence looks like. And so that's been super motivating.
Yeah.
But the transition, Karen doesn't know this yet, but so my separation process from overseas has been really, really hard. Don't recommend. So actually,
No.
this is, I literally haven't told Karen this yet. So I'm actually going to take on one more assignment, and I'm going to,
Oh, we heard it
I'm
here
going to
first.
separate from CONUS, but with the regulations, you're only committed to a year. And so, but that's another thing. The separating from overseas is super challenging. And if I
Oh my
wanted,
God. I just posted, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just posted about that today. And
Yeah.
I'm going through the same process you are, Kimberly. It's hell trying to separate from overseas.
absolutely. There's things where I've literally been so humbled to the point where I'm like, this is stupid difficult. And so I've just been like, all right, you know what? I'm making this harder on myself than I absolutely need to. So I'm going to commit to at least a year somewhere else, and then I can transition and I'll have all my stuff. I'll be on Eastern Standard Time for interviews versus in Korea, like everything. It's just, I feel so much better about it right now.
It totally makes sense. I was excited about you getting into the private sector, but that totally makes sense. And I know it's hard as a single mom, especially, that's the other thing. I was a single mom. Well, I guess, technically he's 24 now. So, but that was also helpful that many of the women that we were connected to in Korea, it's seeing their challenges and their angst about raising their children and things like that, that I was able to validate their angst, but also say, you know what, it's all worked out. It's going to be okay. They're not going to remember this. They're 3.5. They just remember you being an amazing woman, and just saying it's going to work out.
Now, I know Karen was saying, oh, sorry. I know that Karen was saying like, oh, she was maybe more naive coming here, but like, she was a huge blessing to me. I was going through like major life processes where I'm like, this is too hard. I can't do this, all this other stuff. And she poured back into me. So, I mean, for me, I'm just like, yes, this is the kind thing to do, to bring you over coffee and teach you the apps so you can translate things in Korea. Like, that was not a big deal for me. I'm like, that's basic human kindness and being considerate. But like, she probably saw me like have like emotional breakdowns. I'm like, I can't do this, like all this other stuff. And she's like, no, you can, you've got this. This is just a hard day. It's not a bad life. And so, I wanted to like correct it. I'm like, you're not naive. This actually was really hard.
It really is. And I posted about this earlier today. I mean, I've got a meeting actually on Monday night with a guy who's working his VA claim, and he has literally worked from home for almost a month, working on his VA claim nonstop. And like you guys, I'm a branch head. I am the PAO. I don't have a deputy, a person I have people who will stand in as deputy for me when I'm not in the office, but I don't traditionally have a deputy who works the same things I do day in and day out. There's no guarantee I'm going to get a month to work on my VA claim from home. In fact, I would say it's quite the opposite. It's not an entitlement or something that I believe I can do, especially when one of my stand-in deputies is supposed to leave the month before I'm supposed to leave. So that is not happening. And it's really making me make those same thoughts about what it is I'm trying to do out here in terms of separating. And in fact, I was just told that they have 3 people to do VA claims to answer your questions if you're getting through that process and you get stuck. And my colleague literally waits days to get an answer to find out whether or not he can move to the next step. And I'm not about to pay lawyers to do my VA claim. And yes, there's wonderful organizations that'll work with you, but you know your record and your process better than anybody else. And it's something I feel empowered about and want to do myself, with help, of course, if I have a question. But that's I would say the VA claim is one of the biggest hurdles that I'm working through now and trying to figure out if I want to start it or not. And it all depends on whether or not I'm going to take another tour or another assignment. Because if I don't take another assignment, then I need to start that VA claim a year and a half out. That's how I feel. Because
I would like that touched upon something Kim and I talked about, and I encountered as a DoD contractor perceptions that maybe non-military people have of military and vice versa, that there's some perception, oh, you've got all these VAs, you've got all these services, you have all these things at your access, but until you're like working alongside of you all to see all the red tape and the struggle that sometimes is part of that, it's like, oh, I wouldn't want that. But I also had people like in Korea when we were doing exercises, they say like, oh, you contractors, you're going to go back to your hotel and lay on your pillows of gold because you get paid so much money. And we had to explain, well, do you have subsidized housing?
Right.
I don't. Do you have a retirement in 20 years? I don't. Do you have, health insurance through the VA? I don't. That all has to come out of our salary, which looks like a lot to you, but it's not. All that comes out. So that was something that as a contractor, I face a lot between the understanding that mil-civ gap is a real thing.
Yeah, I learned that when I was at UCOM and I was working with some of the contractors there about all their obligations to the contractor when they're not doing their day-to-day job. I had no idea that they had all these extra meetings and sometimes what we would consider collateral duties and like a whole nother job. Like one of the guys I used to sit next to, he would do his 9 to 5 or whatever you want to call it at work. And then he told me he would go home at night and just do his contractor work.
Yeah, that was a whole nother thing. And then being 14-hour difference, I was like waking up very early, getting on my contractor computer, doing all that because I was a team lead and the manager. So I had to do all the project management stuff, having conferences with DC in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. kind of stuff too. That comes along with it.
Yeah. It's just so interesting, Kimberly, that you made your big announcement on the show because the timing couldn't have been funnier with the post that I literally just did a couple hours ago about, I've been telling everybody I'm retiring.
Yeah. Oh,
And
same.
and then I started digging into everything that's going to have to be done here in the UK to do it. And I still might do it. I mean, I'm not decided. I'm going to talk to my detailer hopefully this week and weigh some more options and opportunities for what may or may not come next. But it's daunting. And is that other than, the other reasons that you mentioned, can you touch upon some of the things that the roadblocks that you've encountered trying to retire overseas?
Sure. I think it's challenging too because I think the blanket statement is that people are like, we don't recommend that you do this route. And so there's that. And so I think subsequently you've got I guess this is generalizing, but from my experiences, like you've got personnel staff in like the areas that you need to work through and like the agencies you need to go through, and they're not necessarily as familiar. And like, I don't think I'm so unique, but like my kids are in New Mexico. My non-temporary storage, I think is in Kansas. I think like I'm from Wisconsin. So like I've got like my car is in New Mexico. Like I've got to figure out like multiple things. And I'm like, okay, so for this is what I'm thinking. And I've been in the TAP course. I think I've done 3 TAP courses. And
I've done 1. Wow.
Yeah, like it's not like I'm ill prepared. And one of the recent ones that I was in, a guy who was successfully able to do a sail bridge, that's a whole nother topic too, but who was able to successfully sign up for the skill bridge. He's like, I found out all my answers from Reddit. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Reddit then. And he's not wrong because that's where people are like, look at this reg. This is how I did this. And so it's almost like a cheat sheet to be like, I don't have the time. And I'm in a one deep spot too. I'm like, I don't have the time to figure out what regulation is going to let me do this thing because it best benefits my kids back home for me to be in this location. And so I'm just like, all right, I'm going to go do this. But in turn, seeing that and talking to people, ultimately, I'm like, okay, I have all of these tools and resources. And then it was still so stressful to the point where I'm like, I think I need not even just more time. I think I need to be located CONUS in order for me for my situation to successfully do this. And so this was a very, very recent decision, like Thursday.
Wow.
My leadership has been really great because I had a recent surgery, came back, was trying to process through stuff, and nothing was working. And I'm like, man, I have done all the correct things to set myself up for success with the skill bridge, to do my terminal leave, all this other stuff. And I'm like, it's not lining up. What is happening? And so I went to go talk to my leadership, and I was just like, this isn't going well. I don't know what to do. And they were just like, okay, let's think of some courses of action here. And they've been so supportive. And they're just like, you can do this. You can actually take on another assignment. You don't have to do a full on, you can just do the year. And I was like, all right, I'm so much more comfortable with this idea than anything that I'm doing now. And yeah, but that was probably like the biggest thing, is that like Reddit is my biggest resource to helping
Yeah.
me,
Hey,
because
Karen,
there's
can you
just
mute your mic real quick? I'm having some feedback. I want to see if it's on my end or yours. Yeah, there we go. All right, unmute Kimberly.
yeah.
And then Karen, you mute. Yep. I think we're gonna have to mute when we're not talking, just because I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Okay.
But
Well, I was going to add, it's a lot easier for a contractor because we're at will employees, which means you could be fired for any reason at any time, but you can also quit for any reason at any time. And you just say, I'm quitting. Here's my 2-week notice. I gave 4 weeks notice, but then I was like, okay, now I have to get to the airport. I have to get home. I have to, and Kim, of course, was my ride to the airport. So I was thankful for that. But I do want to say that not all contractors, companies are horrible. Some are amazing. In fact, I called my former contracting company and let them know I was coming back to the States. And they're like, we got you. What do you want? Do you want to go back to the old contract? Do you want to do consulting for us? What do you want? We got you. So that was a good to have that relationship with the former contractor as well.
for sure, I think that it's one of those things where the company makes a big difference. It's how experienced is that company too with overseas moves, and how people can do those kinds of things. I mean, we're really unique in the public affairs community, and that and I say so, a lot of the military is like this, but us especially, in that we work with contractors, we work with civilians, and we work with active duty. And so, and in each instance, there's just different rules. And now that I'm on NATO, I'm in NATO civilian land, and there's different rules for NATO civilians than there is for the active duty. And then, of course, we have nearly 30 nations that make up NATO, make up Allied Maritime Command. So each country has different rules, each national group. And so it's definitely a learning experience to navigate through those challenges. So Kimberly, what are you most looking forward to when you go to this new assignment? Like, what's next for you?
So I feel like if I say it, I'm going to jinx it, but I'm going to say it. So I'm possibly going to Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, Florida. So I'm okay. Like what Karen was talking about, I'm excited that I can read road signs. I know how to work my washer and dryer. I'm going to get a dishwasher. I don't have a dishwasher now. I haven't had a dishwasher in 2 years. So it's like really, really strange, specific things that I'm like really excited about. But then of course, I get to I don't have to miss any of my kids' birthdays anymore. I get to I have the freedom and flexibility to be like, I'm in the continental US, so I can drive or fly or be there. And it's not a 14-hour flight or something that costs $2,000. And I'm also I use the app Marco Polo a lot to talk with my friends back home, but I'm excited to text my friends at a normal hour and be like, hey, this is the morning time window and this is the evening time window that I can catch them. And as I've been working on this transition out, I find myself staying up till like midnight to 2 a.m. because that's when everybody else is awake. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And then just having the time and opportunity, I should be working in like a small team at my next assignment instead of being a one deep spot. And I love this assignment right now, but I'm looking forward to having a little bit more flexibility. So if I want to work on my VA claim, or I need to take some classes, or need to do job interviews or something, I know someone's there, and I don't feel like, wow, I've completely am dropping the ball if I try to prioritize myself. Not that I felt that way at this command, but it's kind of the nature of being in a one deep spot.
Absolutely. I certainly feel that same sense of pressure that if I get too head deep into my transition or the claim, or right now it's just documenting in my medical record. What does that take away from the team in the office? And so that's been a little bit challenging. And we did have one person who definitely can relate, Justin here. He said, having served 17 years overseas himself, he can definitely relate. So I know that this is a universal thing for us, for those of us who've done overseas assignments. And it's interesting because I never thought I was going to be an overseas person. I had never done an overseas tour other than Iceland for about 9 months when I initially enlisted. Other than that, I'd never served on an overseas location. I had deployed, I'd done TDYs, but never lived overseas. And it's definitely a different experience. And it's so neat that this timing came when it did. And Karen, I want to thank you so much for suggesting this conversation. I think that we definitely touched upon some things that I know you wanted to talk about.
Definitely, and thank you. Well, the reason, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I've listened to it for a while now. And so when I was my 15-hour flight back, I was like, this is a Teresa podcast. I need to talk to her.
Appreciate it. And it's really a labor of love to do this show. And I highly recommend that professional communicators, if they're passionate about something, a podcast is a wonderful way to expand their skills in the communication space. I'm a better presenter at work. I'm better at writing talking points. I'm planning this conference right now, like I said, for our chief PAOs. And because I understand now how to write, sexy blurbs at the top to try to entice people to my shows, I know how to title the names of what I want the topics to be, or what we decide as a team that we want to touch upon. And it's all because of something that I pursue in my off duty. And this kind of goes back to what Kelly Renee Hall, I had her on my podcast not too long ago, and her whole thing is #do both. And I think that's really important to find those things that you're passionate about. And if they're related to your job, that's even a bonus, So I think that you guys both
Definitely.
amplify that too. Karen, tell me a little bit about some of the things that you do outside of work in either the communication space, or a little bit about your hobbies, and then we'll move over to Kim.
Well, I love mentoring. Like how I met Kim was as an instructor at Dinfos, and I just love doing that. So while I was going through all of this in South Korea, I was writing a course for West Virginia University, for crisis communications, aimed for their military cohort, because a lot of the existing institutional academia in communications is for business practitioners, and they really didn't have a lot for the military. So that's what I did on my weekends, was write this course for them, and it's launching this spring because West Virginia University is one of the institutions that caters to military students.
That is awesome. Well, congratulations. And I look forward to hearing more about it. We have some academic programs for the military public affairs community. The San Diego State University is a big one with the Navy and the Marine Corps. A lot of us have gone through that program, myself included. But what about you, Kimberly? What are the things, I call them my side hustles. Like I call my podcast a side hustle because it's just this thing I do on the side. But I mean, this April, it'll be 2 years. I can hardly believe it. So tell me a little bit about what your side hustles are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love your podcast. So it's funny to hear you call it a side hustle, because I'm like, I am going on her podcast. This is so cool. But for me, my faith is super important in my life. It's pretty much like the guiding factor on things. So in times where I feel like I can't give a lot, I feel like these communities, especially faith-based communities, have poured into me. So I'm in a season where I can give back. So I serve a lot, work on like connections teams, do a lot of volunteer work. I'm on the worship team for like the community here. And so Camp Humphreys, Agape Church here, is actually the largest garrison chapel in the U.S. Army. So it's just really, it's a cool, unique community where we're all bonded in this idea that we're in South Korea together. So and then talk about work, but I'm also one of the creative team directors here. So get to use that skill set from public affairs. And as we get further ranked up in public affairs, we do a lot more meetings and administrative work. Whereas with this, I get to be creative again. And so that really fills my cup. Exactly. So I get to make a lot more video products and graphics and tell people stories again, which that is literally my favorite thing. That and photography are my favorite things with public affairs. So opportunities to do anything like that really reminds me why I love our job. Meetings less so. But
I can so relate to that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and I think it's unfortunate that there has to be this divide between the doers and the strategists, because I really do feel I'm a mix of both, and I'm a creator at heart. And I
Yeah.
think that our best PAOs are also creators. So
No, totally agree.
I'll respect a PAO that can create and can and does the. I mean, and it's funny because I've actually had a couple bosses that weren't creators that I really respected too. So I know it's possible not to be one, but yeah, I definitely identify with that so much. About you get to that certain level and it just becomes about meetings, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? And we need to stop the whole meetings. Like I could do a whole pod, and I will one day do a whole podcast on the inefficiency of meetings and the hour-long briefs. I won't call them by names because I don't want to call them out, but the hour-long kinds of briefs that happen every single morning that
Sure.
sometimes I think really do go way past when they should go.
Yeah.
And it's not people's not intentions to do that. I mean, I think sometimes they really try. They're like, oh, we'll only make it 20 minutes. And then an hour and a half later, we're still there sitting,
Yeah.
waiting. And so I definitely see that there definitely needs to be some training in the military about the proper execution of meetings and when to have meetings and how often we do them. But that's a conversation for a later time.
Preach. I wholeheartedly agree.
All right, well, ladies, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything that I did not touch upon that you guys would like an opportunity to tell my audience about?
No, you did an amazing job, and congratulations on 75 episodes, and keep having these conversations. They're very real and very authentic and help a lot of people.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
congratulations on the 75th episode. It's very cool. I feel honored to be part of that episode and to be one of your guests. This is really exciting for me. And the only thing that I could say is just like keep pouring into each other, especially women. I think that at least from my military experience, there's women have such unique stories and they go through such unique experiences, and they are so resilient and so professional and so strong. And there's things that you don't even understand people that they go through, but we need each other and we need the community. And so as supportive as you can be, do that.
Awesome, ladies. Well, I really enjoyed this show. And Kimberly, I'm going to tell you about my friend Carrie Jetter backstage in a minute. You might already know who she is, but she was also on my show, and your stuff with women in faith-based communities, I think would resonate with her. But on that note, I am going to go to a full screen and just do my closeout, and then I will meet you guys backstage. But I thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you did on a Saturday morning in the UK, if you didn't join me on Saturday morning in the UK and you were watching this later when the rest of the US wakes up, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're finding me, or if you're finding the podcast on the audio ways, please don't forget to subscribe if you're watching from YouTube. I will see you guys again next week. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a good night. Bye-bye now.